This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash, and Christopher Mitchell. As the video on Soundwave's visor comes to an end, Starscream looks over at his allies, finding a mix of anger and disappointment on their faces. None is this truer for than Arcee, whose expression of anguish and rage slices through the jetbot as though the Star Saber had been plunged into his spark. After all they've been through, Starscream can only imagine what she must be going through, and so in turn endeavors to do the only thing he can in a situation like this: run. Having come to know Arcee quite well since joining the Autobots, Starscream has no doubt in his mind that once she recovers from the shock, she's going to try and scrap him, a theory which is quickly proven correct, as before he can even fully assume his plane form, a shot fired from behind tears off one of his wings, making transformation impossible and forcing him to make his escape on foot. Or at least, he'll try to, when the pain of this unwanted amputation releases its grip on his body so he can move again. Over the sound of his agonized cry, Starscream next hears Prime's voice as he orders Arcee to stop, though based on the roaring sound he hears closing in, this seems to be a vain effort. Then, as the sound reaches its zenith, the maimed jet feels something small and fast collide with the back of his leg, tripping him, and as he hits the ground hard, Arcee reverts from a bike form to a robot mode, and points her blaster arm right into his face. In a voice of cold fury that does not even shake a decibel, the two-wheeler asks her captive, why? To which Starscream gasps that at the time, Cliffjumper was an enemy, so he did what everyone does in war. Though this is plainly not good enough for Arcee, who growls that may be true, but then he had the audacity to act like he was one of them while lying about it day after day. How could he lie to her face? In a tired voice, Starscream replies that he did what he had to in order to survive, though Arcee growls that doesn't excuse it. He should have at least had the decency to own what he did. However, rather than making him feel penitent, this causes anger to flare in the Greybot, as he can hardly believe the hypocrisy of this claim, glaring right back as he scornfully asks if she means the same way she owns scrapping Arachnid. As he had hoped, this gives the two-wheeler pause, allowing Starscream to elaborate that their situations were no different. They both saw a chance to kill a defenseless enemy and they took it, then hid the choice out of shame. So while she can end him now, she can't change the fact that when push came to shove, she proved herself no better than him. Satisfied with his spiteful last words, Starscream watches as Arcee's features darken, with it appearing that she will take him up on that offer of ending him. Though appearances can be deceiving, as in a voice of calm that barely holds back oceans of rage, she tells him that's true, but she's done being like him. She then commands him to stand up and fight so she can kill him on his feet, since that's how Cliff would do it. However, before he can even move a servo, the jeering voice of Megatron cuts in, as he taunts that it seems Optimus cannot even keep his own subordinates from scrapping each other, so what hope does he have to rule a whole planet? Perhaps it would be best if the stewardship of Cybertron fell to someone else. At these words, a new space bridge portal opens up, one far bigger than the one Megatron, Soundwave, and Dreadwing arrived through, with an army of Vehicons pouring out, who quickly surround the shrine. Leering menacingly, Megatron commands the Autobots to surrender and hand over the Omega Keys, though knowing this could mean centuries or even millennia of Decepticon rule, Optimus refuses, commanding the others to retreat and protect the keys, while calling Ratchet to open their space bridge back to base. Obediently, the Autobots flee, with even Arcee reluctantly turning away from Starscream, as she's smart enough to know that getting herself killed for vengeance is pointless, a lesson she tries very hard to forget that she learned from him. Spotting the green portal blossoming in the distance, the Autobots transform into their vehicle modes, using these to dart between their enemies' legs and gain the speed required to reach the space bridge in time. That is aside from Starscream, who due to having lost his wing is unable to transform, meaning he must run after the others. Unfortunately, his legs are simply not fast enough to carry him to the portal before it closes, with the jetbot having a sneaking suspicion Ratchet might have closed it prematurely as his own means of punishing him for Cliffjumper's murder. Nonetheless, this leaves him at the mercy of the Decepticons and Vehicons, who are quick to pin him down and recover the Omega Key he stole from them, before laying into him for one of the most savage beatings of his life. Having endured more than his fair share of these in his time, or at least he believes it to be more than his fair share, Starscream braces himself, curling into a ball and watching as Megatron approaches with a cruel smile on his face. Bitterly, the failed defector asks if his old master's gonna kill him now, though Megatron grins such a fate would be too quick and merciful for filth such as him. No, they're going to leave him to die of energon loss, afraid and alone on this barren world. Briefly, Starscream sees this as something of a lifeline, as he's got enough energon to last him a while, though having evidently factored for this, Megatron helps speed up the process by shooting him in the side. Letting out a strained gurgle of agony, Starscream clutches his side, only to find it sticky and wet as the life-giving fluid begins pooling on the ground far faster than he would like. However, it seems that this isn't fast enough for Dreadwing, who requests permission to finish the traitor off personally. Though shaking his head, Megatron growls that they can't afford to waste time on giving their old friend Starscream the sort of end he's sure Dreadwing would like to, not when there are still 3 more Omega keys to recover. He then asks Soundwave if he has the last coordinates their tracker put out before arriving on Cybertron, and when the mute menace nods, Megatron orders the warship to be moved there as that's where the Autobots will be, before the 3 of them depart via space bridge to lead the charge. While Starscream is concerned for his allies, he is more concerned for himself in this moment, as if he stays here, he'll die. Gritting his teeth as it takes all his willpower to stand, the jetbot hobbles over to where his wing fell and gathers it up, before beginning the long slog out of the sea of rust. Each step of his journey is agony, made worse by the mental anguish of knowing that continual movement will force more energon out of him than if he was still. However, it is only through this movement that he has a chance, as his wanderings are not the aimless ones of a doomed bot, but instead a purposeful march towards his one and only hope. Deep beneath the city of Kaon lies the wreckage of a space bridge he and Shockwave had constructed, before ironically Arcee and Cliffjumper destroyed it during their desperate escape to Earth. Nonetheless, assuming nothing further has happened to it, it should be repairable, and while materials may be scarce, he is nothing if not patient and resourceful. Not to mention, Shockwave had a lab there, so there should at least be a medkit he can use to patch himself up, meaning it's his best chance if he wishes to avoid becoming one with the Allspark prematurely. After several days and sleepless nights thanks to his slowed pace, Kaon comes into view, and with it the self-aggrandizing statue of Megatron, meant to inspire his idiot followers and frighten his enemies. Were he not so weak right now, he would have greatly enjoyed launching his missiles into it and watching it topple, though recognizing that he may not have the seconds to spare as his energon levels are dangerously low, he proceeds through the streets and into the tunnel which will lead him down to the space bridge. One consequence of such severe energon loss is a sense of lightheadedness and general lack of perception, a fact Starscream is rudely reminded of a few moments later, as before he's even a few steps into the tunnel, a security system activates, trapping him between 2 force fields. Groaning unhappily, the bleeding bot bemoans that he shouldn't die here. He's smarter than this, though from out of the darkness, a new voice asks if that is truly the case, before stepping forth to reveal none other than Shockwave. For a moment, Starscream cannot speak, having never imagined the scientist could have survived his run with Arcee, though this just gives Shockwave a chance to speak, as in his measured voice he states that Starscream is late. Balking a little at this reception, the jetbot demands to know what the Cyclopean scientist means, to which Shockwave replies that he presumes Starscream's return is to search for him and return him to Lord Megatron's service. Is that not correct? Seeing a chance to spin this to his advantage, Starscream leers that yes, he was sent here by Lord Megatron himself, though this is met with some suspicion, as Shockwave's singular red optic falls upon the Autobot insignia on his chest. Gulping, the jetbot improvises, hastily replying that in order to reach Kaon safely, their master had him infiltrate the Autobots, as they have put systems in place to prevent Decepticons from returning to their homeworld, which is also why it's taken him so long to come back for him. But alas, before he could make contact, his deception was discovered, and those treacherous Autobots tried to destroy him. At first, Shockwave says nothing, merely surveying Starscream, with it being all the Defector can do not to cry out in panic, though, just before his frayed nerves can break entirely, the mad scientist nods that all visual evidence supports this story, before lowering the force field and instructing Starscream to follow him. Knowing Shockwave is not one to lie or employ mind games, the jetbot feels safe to follow, though for good measure he stays just out of reach. As they go, Shockwave questions how Starscream intends to get them off-world if this embargo is still in place, to which the Defector replies that this is where Shockwave comes in, as Lord Megatron wants him to repair the space bridge the 2 of them were building and use that to return to Earth. Factually, Shockwave agrees that this should be possible in a relatively short span of time, with the pair setting to work as soon as Starscream's repairs are completed and his energon supply has been replenished. Due to Shockwave being, well, Shockwave, there are no breaks once they begin, though for once Starscream does not complain, as he is desperate to return to Earth as soon as possible to check on his allies, not even grumbling when Shockwave uses him as a gopher, dispatching him to gather resources not readily available in the lab. In fact, Starscream is pretty sure the only reason he reaffixed his wing was for that very purpose, though since he did fix him up, he's willing to forgive the motive. Due to not being much of a talker, Shockwave does not press Starscream for details beyond a basic rundown of the current state of the war, something the Jet can answer honestly as he claims that while it is turbulent, the Decepticons recently snatched a great victory out of their enemies' hands, so that now the future of the Autobots is more uncertain than ever. This naturally pleases Shockwave, and playing his part well, Starscream acts pleased as well, though his spark is plagued by a gnawing anxiety, as he can only hope his allies manage to escape whatever Megatron was planning for them when he returned to Earth. Finally, after several weeks of non-stop labor, the pair are able to get their space bridge in working order, though before they can go, Shockwave instructs Starscream to assist him in assembling his research materials, as he has much to show their master. As it turns out, by research materials, the mad machine means a slumbering Predacon that almost makes Starscream spring a leak when he sees it. Proudly, Shockwave reveals that he cloned it during his isolation, and that it is not the first, as eons ago he dispatched many more of these beasts to Earth, so once he is settled in, he will begin retrieving their bones and cloning them to create a Predacon army for Lord Megatron. This is a truly terrifying thought. Though keeping his composure, Starscream sighs that he has no doubt their master will be thrilled. Then, when Shockwave has everything they need, the two of them along with the now awakened Predacon step through the space bridge. Having thought ahead, Starscream had set their arrival coordinates for the Antarctic, as he can fly while Shockwave can't, making it a perfect place to abandon him, since while he is grateful for the repairs and a means to get back to Earth, Shockwave is simply too dangerous and deranged to allow back into Megatron's service. Unfortunately, now he has to extricate himself from the company of the mad bot and his giant snarling pet, a matter made more tricky when Shockwave commands him to summon the warship, falling back on his old staple of lying his way out of problems, having evidently not tumbled to the fact that this often causes just as many problems as it solves. Starscream protests that the comms are bad here, and he'll go look for somewhere with clearer signal. Unfortunately, this is one lie too many, as Shockwave reveals that his scanners are not picking up any interference, which logically means that he is trying to get away from him, while stranding him and his creation in a place where they will quickly freeze and go offline. Therefore, the next logical conclusion is that if Starscream wishes to A. see him perish, and B. keep him from contacting Lord Megatron, then he is not, as he claims, on a deep cover mission, and has in fact defected to the Autobots, making him an enemy and a traitor. At this last word, the Predacon rears up and roars, and knowing to wait for Shockwave to sick that thing on him, he flees. Nonetheless, Shockwave does indeed command his monster to tear the jetbot to pieces, with it taking flight and forcing Starscream to push his afterburners to their absolute limit, as he has no desire to have more pieces of him torn off so soon after having the last ones patched up. Mercifully, he is able to escape the Predacon somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, and seeing no reason to wait, flies off in the direction of the Autobot base, planning what he's going to say all the while, and finding the notion of reuniting with his allies almost as terrifying as the Predacon. However, it seems the time for such a reunion is not yet at hand, as when he comes into visual range for Autobot Outpost Omega-1, he finds the entire mace has been reduced to rubble. For a moment, a sense of immense sadness washes over Starscream, as he assumes the others must have fallen with the base, though this is brought to an abrupt halt when he spots that idiot rookie poking his head out of the ground thanks to the phase shifter. While normally this would be a relief, as it is proof his comrades are not dead, a pair of Vehicons are currently combing through the rubble, meaning at any moment they could turn around and see Smokescreen. That is, unless something else were to draw their attention, and so gritting his teeth, Starscream does the only thing he can to help his ally as he dives low and into the Vehicon's line of sight. As expected, the two drones recognize their erstwhile commander and immediately give chase, though this is all part of the plan, as taking off in the opposite direction from Smokescreen, he flies low to the ground while leading the duo into a narrow canyon. Naturally, the pair assume he is trying to lose them and therefore maintain an even closer pursuit, though they will quickly come to rue this decision, as once Starscream is satisfied with their speed, he shifts back into his robot form and allows them to overshoot him. Then, before they can turn back or even brake, he fires his wrist missiles into their exhausts, obliterating them instantly. Now that the threat has passed, Starscream is at last able to return to where Smokescreen stands waiting for him, with the rookie thanking him for clearing out the Vehicons, though in a tone that makes it clear he has not forgiven him for what they all learned back on Cybertron. Figuring that's about as good as he can hope for, Starscream asks what happened and why the upstart race car is still here, to which Smokescreen begins filling him in, explaining that when they got back to base, they were immediately ambushed by the Con warship, and that Optimus had them scattered to protect themselves and the Omega Keys, though he stayed behind to make sure their leader made it out too. After an infuriating pause, during which time the rookie does not elaborate, Starscream both testily and nervously asks the important question, did he? With it coming as an immense relief when Smokescreen nods. However, this comes with a fairly sizable but, as it's revealed that while Prime survived, he is badly injured, and the only thing that can save him is the Forge of Solus Prime. Growling frustratedly, Starscream surmises that the Forge must have been lost in the evacuation, and if Smokescreen can't find it in the wreckage, then that must mean Megatron has it. Nodding gravely, the Carbot agrees that that's his theory too, so he's been racking his process for how to get on board the warship to get it back, though here Starscream stops him, stating that he'll go. Worriedly, Smokescreen asks if he's sure, to which the defector snaps that of course he's sure. He's the only one who can fly up there, so it has to be him. Not to mention that if he fails, the Autobots haven't lost anything they weren't already prepared to part with. Choosing not to think on this too deeply, Smokescreen instead informs Starscream that the warship has been patrolling this area pretty consistently since the base fell, presumably in case any of them came back, though they're lucky it took off south a while ago without warning, otherwise they'd have been spotted. Shaking his head in dismay, Starscream retorts that they are far from lucky, as this more than likely means Shockwave has managed to make contact with Megatron, and they're on their way to pick him up. Furrowing his brow in evident concern over the mad scientist's brutal reputation, the young elite guardsman asks why Shockwave's here. Though shaking his head, Starscream protests that it's not important, before taking off back the way he came, so he can catch the warship either on their way to or from the Antarctic and recover both the Forge and his lost Omega Key. Thanks to Smokescreen's information and the loan of the phase shifter, finding the ship and passing directly through the hull and into the vault are not difficult tasks, though the same cannot be said for remaining undetected, as just when he's about to wrap his long fingers around the key, the vault door opens, and Knockout steps through it. Diving to the side just in time to avoid being spotted by the Decepticon doctor, Starscream listens as he marches over and snatches up the key, grumbling something about Shockwave wanting to see it, in a tone that suggests Knockout holds the same low esteem for the Cyclopean scientist as him. Knowing better than to try and retrieve the key right from out of his or Shockwave's hands, Starscream bides his time, waiting until Knockout is gone before returning to his primary mission of locating and retrieving the Forge of Solus Prime. However, in what can only be referred to as the latest addition to his mounting pile of failures, he quickly discovers the Forge is gone, presumably having been doled out to one of Megatron's followers as a reward for their part in vanquishing the Autobots. Letting out an exasperated growl, Starscream allows himself to phase back through the floor so that he may fly along the underside of the ship, and poke his head up occasionally to see if he can find the room the key or forge have been moved to. Unfortunately, even after several attempts he does not find either, though what he does find is an all too familiar face, Wheeljack, looking rather worse for wear as he hangs suspended by energy shackles, having evidently endured his fair share of torture. Peering down at Starscream with his one open optic, the Wrecker gruffly asks if Scream is here to finish him off too. Letting out a bemused growl, the Jetbot warns him not to tempt him. All the same, he immediately sets to work disabling Jackie's cuffs, and when the bruiser hits the ground, he offers a wing to lean on so he can remain standing. While the phase shifter would allow them both to pass through the floor so long as they're in contact, Starscream highly doubts that he could hold Wheeljack's weight while in flight, and due to him not having an alt mode that can fly on his own, it seems the prudent course of action is to stay inside the ship and proceed on foot until they can recover their prizes and reach an escape pod. Or at least, it would be the prudent path if there weren't a swarm of Vehicons standing right outside the cell door while Megatron and Dreadwing stand at their head. Smirking, the Decepticon leader asks if Starscream really thought he didn't know he was here, considering this is his fourth time sneaking aboard their ship. And while there are countless sarcastic retorts he would love to hurl back at his former master, it seems that in his fear he has misplaced his tongue, and so only makes vague noises, which seem to amuse Dreadwing. Looking over at the new second-in-command, Starscream is surprised to see the Forge of Solus Prime slung over his back, though whether it is a pleasant surprise or an unpleasant one is yet to be seen, as with all optics squarely locked on him, it would be rather difficult to reach the weapon while also lugging Wheeljack behind him. However, that may actually be the solution, as leaning in he whispers to the Wrecker asking if he can move. Gruffly, Wheeljack replies that he can, but not too fast, though Starscream replies that this isn't an issue, as he slips the phase shifter onto him and instructs him to grab the Forge and jump. So long as he remains intangible until he hits the water, he should survive. From there, he just needs to contact Smokescreen and get the hammer back to Prime ASAP. Looking a little confused, Wheeljack asks what about Starscream? Though smirking, the Jetbot replies that he has his own means of escape. Then, without preamble or dignity, he flees, screaming hysterically and transforming into a plane as he attempts to draw the enemies away just like he did outside the base. Unfortunately, while then he was dealing with Vehicons, here he must contend with Megatron himself, who knowing his cowardly former lieutenant well, does not miss a beat, grabbing him by the wings and tossing him into a wall with enough force that he reverts back to his robot mode. However, while the escape part of the plan did not succeed, the distraction part does, as using the moment of chaos to his advantage, Wheeljack launches forward and phases right through Dreadwing to grab the Forge, before it and he sink through the floor and out of sight. This at least serves as some small comfort, even if his natural bitterness has Starscream wishing he'd never found the Bruiser, since then he could have made that escape himself. Nonetheless, he has not given much time to regret this, as he is promptly hauled to his feet and dragged back into Wheeljack's cell, where a set of cuffs and wing clamps are quickly located and slapped onto him, with none of the gentleness the Autobots used when they took him prisoner so long ago. Then, when it is absolutely certain that he can't weasel his way to freedom, Megatron commands Dreadwing and the Vehicons to bring him, since it's time they rid themselves of this pesky traitor once and for all. Wordlessly, Starscream's captors begin dragging him, and knowing the layout of the ship well, he initially believes they're taking him to the bridge to execute him like Cliffjumper. What irony that would be. Though this is proven false when they turn down another corridor and out onto the flight deck. Here Shockwave is waiting for them, and having a pretty good idea what Megatron has in store for him, he begins to plead, begging for Megatron not to do this, to consider his years of service and kill him personally, or let Dreadwing do it, anyone but the sadistic Cyclops. Chuckling slightly at Starscream's terror, Megatron assures his his former subordinate that Shockwave will not be the one to terminate him. No, that honor goes to his pet, with this execution also serving as a demonstration of the Predacon's power for all Decepticons to see. At once, Shockwave presses on a device, and in the distance a roar is heard, with this soon being coupled with the sound of terrible wing beats as the monster's silhouette comes into view. Try though he might, Starscream cannot will his body to move, being rooted to the spot as the Predacon draws near. Then, as its massive body touches down on the flight deck, Megatron shoves him towards the beast. Spotting its prey, the Predacon wastes no time going on the attack, as it attempts to bite him in two with its razor fangs. Fortunately, Starscream's legs give way at just the right moment to avoid this grisly fate, though now he must contend with its taloned paws as it tries to crush him, forcing the jetbot to roll for his life. Frantically, Starscream looks around for anything that can help him, and spying a slight gap in the crowd of Vehicons assembled to watch his demise, he scrambles for it. Not because he believes he'll be able to fly to freedom, but because at least death by fall will be quick rather than the protracted and agonizing end he's likely to face at the hands of Shockwave's monstrosity. Unfortunately, fate denies Starscream even this, as before he can reach the end, he is shoved back into the makeshift arena by the crowd, while Megatron jeers that he would have made a poor gladiator. Acidly, the jetbot retorts that he doubts even Megatron himself could have done better with his hands bound and no weapons, though he is promptly reminded Megatron is not the one he should be concerned with, as the Predacon's talons rake his back and send him crashing to the floor. Once more Starscream attempts to crawl away, though this time the beast is wise to his tricks, planting a paw on his already scratched frame and dragging him slowly back towards it, suggesting that it's done playing with its food. Rolling over weakly, Starscream looks up into the bestial optics of the creature who will surely be the last thing he ever sees, though, before it can land its killing blow, the sound of a blaster shot rings out, with it hitting the Predacon and forcing it to wince. At once, everyone begins looking around wildly for the shooter, with Starscream spotting them first, though even still, he can hardly believe what he's seeing. It's Prime, and not only is he looking stronger than he ever has before, but he's flying thanks to a set of newly acquired wings. In spite of all his fear, Starscream cannot help but smirk for a second, as he always knew the other Autobots were jealous of his ability to fly, though now is not the time for such thoughts, as when Prime fires off a second blast, the Predacon retreats, its animal instincts pushing it to avoid this pain again. This allows Optimus to land heroically on the flight deck, and summoning his sword, he slashes twice, severing Starscream's hand and wing cuffs. In a tone of bafflement, the jetbot asks what he's doing here, to which Optimus calmly replies that he came to save him, as he would for any Autobot in need. Then, as he pulls him to his feet, he commands Starscream to transform and fall back. Not needing to be told twice as a horde of Decepticons and Vehicons are closing in, Starscream leaps into the air and assumes his plane form, while taking off at top speed, though he does not flee, instead hanging back to ensure Prime makes it out too. However, these concerns are wholly unfounded, as with his new upgrade, the Autobot leader is quickly able to knock away any cons who try to grab him before taking flight as well, and heading back the way he came with Starscream right behind him. As they head for the ground, Starscream questions if Wheeljack and Smokescreen made it to him in one piece, with Prime confirming they made it just in time, as he was about to become one with the Allspark, though now he is renewed, and with it, so is their fight for the future of this world and Cybertron. Finding some reassurance in this claim, the jetbot asks what the next step is, to which Optimus answers that now they must locate their other allies and find a way to bring them home. That is, once they have a place to bring them. However, here Starscream speaks up, as he states that he might know just the place, and so taking point, he leads Optimus to the derelict ruins of the Harbinger. When they arrive, he proudly declares that this should be perfect, as the only Decepticon who knew its location is Arachnid, and she's gone. Not to mention it has a ground bridge and Primus knows what other Cybertronian technology, so if they play their cards right, it could be as good as their old base. Nodding approvingly, Optimus states that Starscream has done well, a statement which means more to the jetbot than his leader might realize. Then, as Wheeljack and Smokescreen arrive at the coordinates they were sent, Prime leads them all inside, with instructions to fire up the ground bridge, as it's time for Team Prime to be reunited. Thankfully, due to being relatively untouched, it does not take long before the familiar green portal is humming to life inside the Harbinger, and as Optimus sends out a message on all Autobot channels for those still alive to respond with their coordinates, he is delighted to receive 4 replies, one from every scattered Autobot. Punching in the locations as he receives them, Starscream watches as one by one they start coming through the ground bridge. First Bulkhead and Miko, then B-Raff and Ratchet, and finally Arcee and Jack. At the sight of their friends all together again, the Autobots and their human partners rejoice, while also complimenting Optimus on his new look and teasing Wheeljack about needing a new paint job and a good buffing. However, when their optics fall on Starscream, the mood changes drastically, with Bulkhead saying what they're all thinking, as he demands to know what he's doing here. Straightening up a little, Starscream prepares to explain himself, but before he can, Optimus steps up and graciously states that were Starscream not here, he would not be alive, as the jetbot was instrumental in saving his life. In a disapproving tone, Ratchet asks if that's meant to make everything okay, and they should just forget what he's done. Though shaking his head, Optimus informs his friend that this is not what he is saying. Like all of them, he will continue to mourn the loss of Cliffjumper every day, though he must also acknowledge what has happened since then, and it is plain to him that the Starscream who did that heinous deed and the one who risked his life for him are different, so he will accept the defector for who he has become, and that is an ally and an Autobot. Evidently, this does not sit well with the others, though for Arcee it is utterly unacceptable, a fact she makes quite plain to Optimus, as she tells him that while she respects him more than anyone, if that's his decision, then she's leaving, since she simply cannot be part of the same unit as the bot who scrapped her partner. This causes a look of deep sadness to cross the Prime's face, though in his usual sagely manner, he replies that if this is her choice, he will respect it, though he hopes she knows she will always be welcome back on Team Prime. Nodding gravely, Arcee thanks him, then with another word, she turns and begins heading for the ground bridge. However, it seems not everyone is content with the idea of her leaving, as running up beside her, Jack urges the two-wheeler to stay, asking what about their partnership. Sighing soberly, Arcee assures him that they will remain partners, and she'll check up on him frequently, so he had best keep out of trouble. She just can't be here right now. Letting out a sigh of his own, Jack admits that he understands that, and stepping back to join the others, he watches Arcee go. Unfortunately, there is no time for the Autobots to grieve their loss, nor do they even have time to fully explore their new base, as now that they're back together, Starscream begins filling them in on what he's learned regarding Shockwave and the Predacon bones he means to collect. Thankfully, due to the Harbinger being a Decepticon ship, it does not take long for Ratchet and Raph to upgrade their scanners so they can pick up on the fossils too, with it being good they do, as not long after settling in, they receive two readings, one in Texas and the other in Scotland. Figuring Megatron might be in Texas as it's closer to the warship's last location, Optimus selects to go there personally, taking Bumblebee and Smokescreen with him, while Bulkhead is assigned to lead the mission to Scotland. Due to Ultra Magnus being absent thanks to the Omega Lock never discharging and calling him to Earth, and Wheeljack still recovering from being tortured, Starscream is the only combatant available to accompany Bulkhead, a fact the ex-Wrecker is none too happy about, as he asks Miko to come with him, since at least that way he'll have someone who can watch his back. This childishness continues even after they leave the Harbinger, as when they reach the top of the cliff which their scanners suggest will lead down to the Predacon bone, Starscream offers to fly down and retrieve it, only for Bulkhead and Miko to act as though they don't hear him, with the green bot clumsily scaling down the cliff face while the human perches on his shoulder. Rolling his optics at this behaviour, the jetbot then prepares to fly down anyway, only to spot something coming out of a cave at the bottom of the canyon, a Veacon scout. Recognizing they are not alone, Starscream attempts to warn his companions, though continuing to ignore him, they pay this no heed, and are therefore spotted. Growling at how this all could have been avoided, Starscream transforms and rushes down to assist Bulkhead in the fight, though it is already too late, as before either Autobot can scrap him, the Veacon calls for help, with Dreadwing's voice coming out of the comm as he confirms that he is on his way, and he's bringing the beast. Knowing just how deadly this thing is, Starscream tells Bulkhead they need to act fast, as they cannot defeat the Predacon alone, though once again, this is met with stony silence. Having had about all he can take, Starscream yells at Bulkhead to stop being an idiot and listen to him. If he wants to punish him for Cliffjumper by ignoring him for the rest of eternity, that's fine, but start when the mission's done, since right now, he's the only one who's fought the Predacon and knows its strength firsthand, so all Bulkhead will accomplish by refusing to use his knowledge is getting himself and his little human friend killed. This at last gives Bulkhead pause, as in a flat tone, he tells Starscream to speak. Knowing they have no time to waste, the defector insists they head into the cave and grab the fossil as quickly as they can, then get out. It's the only chance they have at survival. Huffing slightly, Bulkhead calls this typical screamer, always picking the cowardly option. He can't believe he ever thought there was a hint of decency in his spark. Huffing now too as he leads the way, Starscream protests that they're not mutually exclusive, as while he will make no claims that he doesn't prize self-preservation, he's learned to care for others and to be a better bot, something Bulkhead is partially responsible for. While Bulk merely meets this with a disbelieving grunt, Miko curiously asks what her buddy did, with Starscream recounting their mission to recover the toxin, and how it was Bulk who convinced him not to use it as a bioweapon against the Decepticons. At the time he thought it was because he wanted to kill Megatron himself, but now he realizes the bruiser changed his perspective. Unfortunately, this earns a scoff from the ex-Wrecker, who asks how they're supposed to know that wasn't just another lie, to which Starscream sighs that he guesses they'll just have to make up their own minds whether they believe him or not. However, before more can be said on the matter, the sound of heavy wing beats fills the auditory senses, and looking back, the team spot the Predacon landing at the entrance of the cave with Dreadwing mounted on its back. Seeing that time has run out, Bulkhead yells for them to book it, forcing the Autobots to charge headlong deeper into the cave, as while what lays ahead is uncertain, what lies behind is very clear, a monster they can't defeat. Naturally, Dreadwing and his monstrous mount give chase, with the Predacon letting loose bursts of fire breath that the Autobots only narrowly avoid. Fortunately, before the beast can get lucky and barbecue one of its targets, the tunnel narrows down enough that the Predacon's shoulders get stuck. However, this is at best a temporary fix, as from the other side, the Autobots hear Dreadwing assuring the monster that he will free it shortly, and then they will crush their enemies together. Hoping to avoid that particular fate, Starscream hastily begins trying to call for a ground bridge, though to his dismay the heavy layers of rock are blocking his signal, meaning they're on their own. Or at least, that is what he thinks until Bulkhead points out a small gap in the cave roof that Miko can climb through, since maybe once she's out there, she can contact Ratchet or Agent Fowler. Nodding her understanding, Miko begins to climb, while down below, Starscream and Bulkhead watch as the tunnel wall bursts open, allowing Dreadwing and the Predacon to step into the cavern. At once, the current Decepticon 2IC zeroes in on Starscream, wanting some long overdue payback for his twin, which means Bulkhead is forced to face the prehistoric dragon on his own. Neither matchup is particularly favourable for the Autobots, as Dreadwing slams into the other Jetbot, keeping him trapped in close range, while the Predacon grabs Bulk in its mouth and tosses him into walls like a chew toy. Due to his massive frame, each impact causes dust and small fragments of rock to fall onto the combatants, with this giving Starscream an idea, though a terrible one. Evidently, Bulkhead has the same thought, as he tells Starscream to fire his missile at the roof of the cavern, since while they'll be crushed by the cave-in, they'll take out the Con's second-in-command and their strongest weapon in the Predacon, so it's a worthwhile trade. Wouldn't the schemer agree? Exhaling deeply, Starscream nods that while he hates to admit it, and he truly does, Bulk's right. Then, as he screws up his optics so he doesn't have to see his end coming, he fires, and he hears the heavy rumbling of the cave collapsing all around him. For a time, the Scottish Highlands are still as the rock slide abates, and the new pile of rubble settles into place. None who visit this place will ever know why the collapse happened, or the sacrifice it required, only seeing a strange natural phenomenon. However, one thing they will not see is Dreadwing or the Predacon, as a short time later, they emerge from the wreckage, badly beaten but still operational, though whether they'll remain so is anyone's guess, as they must now report back to Lord Megatron and explain that the bone was destroyed in the blast. Following their departure, another silence falls, as does night, with no sign of Starscream or Bulkhead, though, just when it seems that all hope is lost, the ex-wrecker emerges. Wasting no time, he begins to dig, calling out for his comrade, with it not taking long to find Starscream lying on his back, having evidently taken the most damage due to being the smallest and the one at the epicenter of the blast. Despite his injuries, Starscream cannot help but use this opportunity to snark at Bulkhead, claiming that if he didn't know better, he'd say the big brute was worried about him. Coolly, Bulk replies that he wouldn't go that far, though he's at least impressed. Scream was ready to lay down his life without a second thought, so while that doesn't make what he did okay, he's at least willing to acknowledge that he has changed. Sitting up gingerly, Starscream states that this is good enough for now. Then as Ratchet's voice fills his head, having apparently been trying to contact him since Miko called from a nearby human village, he gratefully accepts the offer of a ground bridge, and begins hobbling towards it, with Starscream this time slinging his arm over the Greenbot's shoulder. Unfortunately, there is no rest for the wicked, as no sooner than the Scotland team arrive back at base, and Miko shows them the piece of Predacon bone she found during her climb, meaning the mission wasn't a total loss, Fowler comes barging in to inform them of Decepticon activity in New Mexico. Since the new arrivals are injured and Prime's team is still in Texas, Jack suggests contacting Arcee, with Ratchet agreeing as she's still an Autobot, so he believes she'll help so long as she doesn't have to interact with certain bots. His icy tone making Starscream feel even worse than when he had a Mesa fall on him, as he cannot deny that his actions are directly responsible for them being down an Autobot when they're already spread too thin as is. Speaking up again, Jack suggests that he should go join Arcee, so she has someone watching her back, though clearing his throat, Wheeljack retorts that he'll do it. After all, he feels much better now, and besides, he can't stand being cooped up here anyway. Not buying this for a second, but also recognizing the dire situation they're in, Ratchet reluctantly agrees, though with the warning that he'll ground bridge him right back if he overexerts himself. Saluting sarcastically, the other wrecker smirks that he wouldn't dream of it. Then, as he steps through the ground bridge, he arrives not only in New Mexico, but in the middle of a Viacon horde. Grinning that today must be his birthday, Wheeljack quickly sets to work dispatching them with his dual blades, employing such proficiency that by the time Arcee rolls in, having received Ratchet's call, the cons are all gone, and Wheeljack teases that she's late to the party. Not being in the mood for jokes after all that's happened, Arcee tersely tells him to come on, with the pair rolling out as they head for the cave where the Predacon bone is located. As they go, Wheeljack attempts to engage the two-wheeler in conversation, filling her in on everything that's happened while she's been away, with Arcee asking after the Darbies, since she's not had a chance to visit them yet. Earnestly, Wheeljack replies that they miss her. Everyone misses her. Though shutting this down, the bike firmly states that he knows why she can't go back. Grunting in the affirmative, Wheeljack agrees that he knows. In fact, he knows better than anyone why she doesn't want to stick around. But he also knows that she's wrong. At once, Arcee comes to a screeching halt, and as the pair both revert to their robot forms, Arcee demands to know what he means by wrong. Bluntly, Wheeljack states that he's not going to give her some greater good speech. He just thinks she's letting her anger and grief over Cliff cloud her judgment and lead her down a path she doesn't want to be on. Definitely mad now, Arcee asks who Wheeljack thinks he is telling her what she shouldn't do, when he spent megacycles gallivanting around the galaxy playing Wrecker, and even when he came to Earth, he refused to join the team since it was too stifling for him. Holding his ground, Jackie replies that this is why he can tell her, because she's making the same mistakes he did, since he lost a lot of quality time with folks he cares about like Bulk and Miko, since he was too hard-headed, but it's not too late for her to learn from him and come back. Angrily, Arcee asks what about Starscream, to which Wheeljack replies that he's made some pretty terrible mistakes too, but it's like Prime said, he's changed since then. Back on the warship, he saved his life, and Prime's life, and from what Bulk's told him, he even saved her life during the fight with Unicron. Unfortunately, this only earns him a scathing snort, as Arcee sneeringly questions if that makes everything okay then. Sure, he scrapped her partner, and Primus knows how many other friends, not to mention hid the truth of it and lied to her face, but he did some nice things too, so she ought to just forgive him. Is that it? Flatly, Wheeljack replies that no, it isn't. He hasn't forgiven Screamy and he doesn't expect Arcee to either, but he also thinks the Jetbot's done enough to deserve a chance to earn their forgiveness, without having his spark ripped from his chest on sight. Sighing deeply, Arcee replies that she doesn't think she has it in her to give him that, with this putting an end to the conversation as they transform back and resume driving to the site of the Predacon bone. Likewise, when they arrive, the excavation is done in silence, with the only thing to break it being a call from Jack. Worriedly, Arcee asks her human friend what's wrong, to which the boy reveals that his mum and Agent Fowler went to the museum to collect another of the bones, but they never reported in, and now he's in the parking lot, and all that's there is her phone. Recognizing how scared and overwhelmed the boy is sounding, Arcee vows to find June, with Wheeljack nodding at her to go, since he can take it from here. However, before she does, he sighs that he hopes she'll at least consider what he's said, though the only response he gets is Arcee transforming into a bike and tearing off in search of the humans. Unfortunately, even with all her determination and smarts, she will not be able to find them, as presently, June and Agent Fowler are captives aboard the Decepticon warship, since like in canon, Knockout ambushed them at the museum, though unlike in canon, due to Dreadwing taming the Predacon by treating it with respect, it did not destroy the comm relay, meaning Knockout could immediately ground bridge back with both the Talon and 2 hostages. Figuring they could be used as bargaining chips to make the Autobots hand over any fossils they have acquired, Megatron assembles his senior staff to discuss a plan, though it seems there will be one uninvited guest, the Predacon itself, who reveals not only that it can transform, taking on a robot form, but also that it is intelligent. This gives Megatron a moment of pause, as while this Predacon, who names himself Predaking, does swear allegiance to the Decepticon cause, this does not mean that all his kind will do the same. Not only that, but should this new king decide that he and his kind should rule, their combined strength would be too much for even him to handle, so for the sake of control, the Predacon cloning initiative must be halted, and the unfinished specimens terminated. Ever the pragmatist, Shockwave agrees with his master's conclusion, and due to no Starscream being present, settles on the direct route, simply ground bridging to his lab and flushing the tanks, all the while the other Decepticons attempt to distract Predaking so he does not learn what they have done. However, this is not to say that nobody knows, as back in the Harbinger, Shockwave's report to Megatron comes in loud and clear. Seeing this for the game changer it is, Ratchet is quick to assemble the others and fill them all in, with this resulting in the first feelings of hope anyone here has had since the reunion, as now that Project Predacon is cancelled, they are at last free to take the fight back to the Decepticons without worry about the looming threat of a Predacon army. Looking to Optimus, the Autobots ask what they should do now, and adopting a determined expression, the leader replies that now is the time for action, so so he believes the best course is to storm the warship so they may rescue their captive allies and recover the relics that were stolen from them, chief among them being the last Omega Key, as he has not given up on his dream of reviving Cybertron. As one, the Autobots and humans declare that they're with Optimus all the way, though as they depart to begin making their preparations, they all share the same thought without having to say it. If Optimus has opted for an attack rather than a stealth mission, then this may mean he intends it to be their final confrontation with the Decepticons. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.